They had never seen anything like him before. His body was fragile compared to their tall, scaled frames, his skin pale under the faint glow of the medical lamps, and yet there was something in the way his chest rose and fell with stubborn rhythm that unsettled the elders of the council. He was not supposed to be alive. The wreckage they had pulled him from was scattered across half the plain, flames still rising when the patrol brought the broken figure to their sanctuary. Every calculation suggested he should have perished with the others. But he had not, and that one impossible detail shifted the weight of their decision. The Thalrians were not a generous people. Their history was full of compromises carved in blood and treaties signed with trembling claws. Survival had made them pragmatic, suspicious of strangers, and careful not to entangle themselves in the conflicts of the wider galaxy. They had endured too much loss to gamble on ideals. Yet when the human opened his eyes and whispered a word they did not know, there was a silence in the chamber that none dared break. He had reached out, fingers weak, seeking not dominance or demand, but simple presence. That gesture became heavier than any weapon. The younger healers argued for mercy. They said life, no matter the origin, carried weight. The older ones warned of consequence. To harbor an outsider, especially one from an unknown species, was to invite trouble from powers beyond their control. The galaxy was not forgiving. Yet in the end, when the council debated through the long hours, it was not logic that broke their resistance. It was memory. A memory of when they too had needed help and none had come. Their world had burned once under the weight of another empire's expansion, and though they had rebuilt, they had never forgotten what abandonment felt like. To turn their backs on this lone survivor would be to repeat the cruelty they had once endured. So they kept him, days passed in uneasy rhythm. The human was quiet at first, his voice broken by injury and exhaustion. He learned to sip their water, strange though it was to him. He ate their simplest roots, though his stomach fought them. And slowly, painfully, he began to heal. He watched them with eyes that seemed to weigh not just their shapes but their souls. The children dared approach him before the adults did, curious of his hair, his strange hands, his odd smile. When he laughed, weak, rough, but alive, the sound startled the hall. Laughter was rare in Thalrian homes, a luxury lost after too many wars. But the sound carried warmth, as if the fragile being they had saved carried with him some forgotten echo of hope. At night he dreamed loudly. The healers said his cries echoed memories too deep to silence. He muttered names, called out words they did not understand, and sometimes wept in his sleep. A few wanted to quiet him with sedatives, but others said no, his voice was proof that he lived, and life had the right to speak even in pain. Slowly, their fear shifted into something else, something dangerous, attachment through gestures, drawings, and the slow bridge of language, fragments of understanding formed. He showed them the symbol of his homeworld, a sphere of blue and green, circles of white above and below. He tapped his chest and said a word again and again until they learned it, human. Then, with a gravity that seemed larger than his frail form, he pressed his palm to theirs, repeating another word, friend. It was not instant trust. Suspicion lived deep in Thalrian hearts, carved by centuries of betrayal. Yet the human did not ask for dominance, only survival. He listened when they taught him the name of their rivers, and he repeated their words clumsily until laughter softened their guarded hearts. He shared with them fragments of songs, humming half-melodies that carried strange beauty even without meaning. The young healers began to hum them too, filling the halls with notes their world had never heard. Still, danger pressed at their borders. The crash had not gone unnoticed. Scavengers circled the wreckage, and whispers traveled through the nearby systems. To shelter an unknown offworlder was to risk being seen as harboring a spy or a fugitive. When patrols questioned them, the council lied, saying no survivor had been found. It was a dangerous gamble. Yet when they looked at the human sitting weakly by the fire, trying clumsily to carve one of their tools with trembling hands, they knew they had chosen a path they could not retreat from. The decision reached its test when a delegation from a neighboring power arrived. They demanded entry, seeking evidence of survivors from the wreck. Their reputation was cruel, their enforcement swift. The Thalrians stood firm, insisting no living being had been found. Behind stone walls, the human crouched in silence, hidden by the very people who had once debated leaving him to die. When the delegation left in frustration, suspicion still sharp in their eyes, relief flooded the halls. For the first time, they realized the cost they were willing to pay for the sake of one fragile life. The human grew stronger with each day. His steps steadied, his wounds closed. He began to train quietly in the open field, practicing movements that seemed both dance and discipline. The Thalrians watched in awe as his frail form displayed a will like iron. When asked, he explained in broken phrases, his people trained always to endure, to fight if needed, to never abandon hope. The words rang deeper than they expected. It was not just survival, it was a declaration of what his people valued. When finally he asked for a way to contact his home, silence fell again. The risk was enormous. A signal strong enough to cross the void could be traced, and the powers that prowled the sector would notice. Yet as they looked upon him, this being who had brought laughter to their children, who had trusted them with his weakness, who had given them songs they had never known, they found themselves unable to deny him. Against their instincts, they built a transmitter, piecing together fragments from his broken craft with their own technology. The night they activated it, the stars seemed to hold their breath. The message was simple, halting, carried by a voice still weak but clear, alive. Safe. Not alone. Humans, not forget. When the signal vanished into the black, the Thalrians thought little would come of it. The galaxy was vast, and one voice was fragile against the roar of countless empires. They had done what they believed was right. They expected nothing in return, but in the heart of the stars, far beyond their borders, the echo of that voice stirred something far greater than they imagined. The message traveled farther than the Thalrians ever believed possible. Across void and silence, across relays and listening posts, across the endless black where countless signals were lost to time, this one was not lost. Somewhere in the abyss of human space, ears were listening. Somewhere, monitors blinked to life, alarms tripped, officers leaned forward in disbelief. A voice, broken but alive, whispered across the stars, alive. Safe. Not alone. Humans, not forget. At first, the Thalrians thought nothing of it. They had fulfilled a kindness, a gesture that eased their conscience and nothing more. The galaxy was cruel and vast. What difference could one fragile message make? They resumed their routines, watching their guest grow stronger, teaching him new words, listening to his stories of distant oceans and endless skies. Days stretched into weeks, and still they believed themselves isolated from consequence, until the sky changed. The first signs were faint, little more than background anomalies to those not watching closely. Strange fluctuations shimmered across the upper atmosphere, the kind that made veteran star watchers frown. Ships began reporting unusual interference at the edges of their patrol ranges. Miners returning from deep space spoke of seeing shadows move where no fleet should be. The council dismissed it at first, reasoning it as cosmic weather, but whispers grew. Something was coming. Then came the lights. The night above their capital blazed with falling stars that did not burn or fade. They moved with purpose, sharp and disciplined, cutting through darkness with precision impossible to mistake. Children pointed skyward in awe, soldiers gripped their weapons in fear, and elders simply fell silent. The Thalrians had seen ships before. Trade vessels, raiders, scavengers, all were common. But this was something different. The scale defied comprehension. It was not one ship, not a patrol, not even a squadron. The sky filled with vessels, thousands of them, organized with terrifying grace. The human was the first to rise from his bed when he heard the sound. He walked to the balcony, breath trembling, eyes wide as the heavens blazed with the shapes of home. His lips moved around words the Thalrians could not understand, but they did not need translation. The look on his face said everything. His people had come. Fear gripped the council. To have sheltered one was a risk. To host the attention of an entire species was something else entirely. They prepared defenses, not against attack, but against misunderstanding. Yet no fire fell from the sky, no bombardments shook the earth. Instead, a single transmission cut through the air, clear and commanding, in a voice that seemed both steel and warmth. We have heard the voice of one of our own. We thank those who sheltered him. Know this, humanity does not forget its children. To those who sheltered him, you are no longer alone. The words echoed through every channel, every hall, every home. For the Thalrians, who had expected suspicion or conquest, it was staggering. These newcomers, who commanded fleets that outshone their entire military history, spoke not with demands but with gratitude. It was a kind of power the galaxy rarely understood, the power of remembering one life as worthy of an entire armada, yet gratitude was not the only message carried in that voice. Beyond their borders, rival powers heard the same transmission. Where the Thalrians felt awe, others felt dread. Whispers rippled through the sector. Humanity had mobilized not for conquest, not for resources, but for one. Such loyalty was dangerous. Such unity, terrifying. If they would send a fleet for one survivor, what would they send for 1,000? What would they unleash for their homeworld itself? The balance of fear tilted, and the galaxy watched with wary eyes. The human stood among the Thalrians when the first delegation descended. He walked with a limp still, scars yet unhealed, but his posture carried pride. The vessel that landed bore markings strange to the aliens but familiar to him, his people's flag, bold and unyielding. When the hatch opened, soldiers in armor unlike anything the Thalrians had ever seen stepped forward. Their movements were efficient, protective, but not hostile. And when their commander removed his helmet and embraced the survivor, there was no mistaking it. This was not military formality. It was family, stretched across the stars, closing a wound. The Thalrians expected celebration, perhaps even relief that the burden of shelter was finally lifted. But humanity did not take their own and leave. Instead, the commander turned to the council and bowed. Your people risked everything for one of ours. For that, humanity owes you more than words. Where we go, you will not stand alone. The promise struck like thunder. For a species that had endured isolation, betrayal, and abandonment, it was almost unbearable to hear. Some wept openly. Others trembled, torn between gratitude and fear of what this alliance would invite. They had saved a life to heal their own conscience, not to summon an empire. Yet here was the empire, vast and unstoppable, offering not conquest but loyalty. Still, not all welcomed it. Rival delegations arrived soon after, their tones sharp, their threats thinly veiled. They accused the Thalrians of manipulating humanity, of harboring dangerous allies, of destabilizing the balance of power. They warned that such alliances would bring war upon their world. Humanity's answer was silence at first. Their fleet simply hovered above, a quiet wall of steel and light that dwarfed any threat. And then, when one rival pushed too far, sending raiders to test the borders, the silence ended. The retaliation was swift, not cruel but absolute. A squadron of human ships intercepted the raiders before they ever touched Thalrian soil. In less than a heartbeat, the attackers were disabled, their weapons reduced to debris, their engines silenced. No lives were taken, but the message was carved into the void: this world was under humanity's protection, and no harm would be tolerated. The Thalrians watched in awe and terror. To see power wielded with such precision, to see mercy held in the same hand as overwhelming strength, was to glimpse a philosophy they did not understand. When they asked why, the human commander answered simply, because one of us was here. Because you chose kindness when you could have chosen fear. That is all the reason we need. The survivor, once weak and broken in their halls, now stood taller than any of them. His voice grew stronger as he spoke to his people, as he explained the courage of those who had sheltered him. He told them of the risks the Thalrians had taken, the lies told to protect him, the dangers endured. Humanity listened, and where most empires might weigh resources or territory, they weighed loyalty. That balance tipped in favor of the aliens who had risked everything for a stranger to eye. In the weeks that followed, the skies above Thalria remained full. Human fleets built stations in orbit, not as occupiers but as guardians. Aid shipments arrived, food, medicine, technology far beyond what the Thalrians possessed. Engineers worked alongside their people, repairing old infrastructure, stabilizing defenses, teaching without condescension. Everywhere, the message was the same: this was repayment, not conquest, and yet, beneath the surface, tension simmered. The Thalrians struggled with their new reality. Gratitude warred with fear. Was this protection, or was it a gilded cage? Would humanity's presence invite greater storms from rivals unwilling to accept this alliance? Every night the council argued, but every morning they awoke to the sight of ships above, silent and watchful, and remembered the simple truth: they had saved one, and in return, an entire species had come to stand by them. The galaxy could not ignore it. Old alliances trembled, old enemies whispered of preemptive strikes, old empires calculated and recalculated their chances against a humanity that had revealed only a fraction of its might. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, fragile, short-lived, scattered. But now the illusion was shattered. They had shown the one truth that frightened the galaxy most: their unity was not theoretical, not conditional. It was absolute, and it had been proven, beyond all doubt, by the answer to a single voice crying out across the void. The skies no longer felt the same. Where once there had been emptiness, now there was a constant gleam of ships suspended in the upper reaches of the atmosphere, their silhouettes like silent guardians over the world below. To the Thalrians, it was still unreal. They had expected consequences, perhaps even punishment, for choosing mercy. What they had not expected was protection, aid, and the weight of an entire civilization shifting in their favor. Yet even as the presence of humanity stabilized their world, unease lingered. Protection was safety, but safety often came with chains. They could not help but wonder whether this unexpected alliance was salvation or merely another form of captivity. The human survivor, the one they had hidden and healed, became a bridge they had never sought. He stood taller now, stronger, scars lining his body like inscriptions of survival. He moved among both peoples with ease, speaking with his own in firm tones while answering the Thalrians with patience. Where others doubted, he reassured. Where suspicion stirred, he calmed. He understood their fear because he had once shared it, lying broken in a hall full of strangers, unsure whether kindness was a mask. And yet, as he spoke of his people's creed, of the principle that no human was left behind, his words rang with a conviction that even the cautious could not dismiss. Still, doubts whispered through Thalrian society. Some feared that to stand beneath the shadow of such a fleet was to invite war with enemies too vast to name. They were not wrong. The first test came swiftly. A neighboring empire, one long hostile and envious, demanded that humanity withdraw. They claimed the Thalrians had violated neutrality, that they had endangered stability by harboring a foreign survivor. To emphasize their point, they sent warships toward the border, bristling with weapons and arrogance. What followed was not battle in the way the galaxy knew it. Humanity did not answer with overwhelming slaughter. Instead, they answered with presence. A single human carrier positioned itself in the path of the incoming fleet. Its weapons remained cold, but its silence was more menacing than any barrage. The rival commander issued threats, warnings, insults. Humanity's answer was to open a channel, display the damaged human who had once lain helpless in Thalrian care, and speak a sentence that rippled through every channel in the sector: "You threaten those who chose mercy. Do so again, and you threaten us all." The rival fleet faltered. They had seen power before, but power coupled with absolute loyalty was something new. They withdrew without firing a shot, not because they feared defeat, they had feared that from the start, but because they realized they were not merely confronting ships. They were confronting an idea, one more unyielding than steel. Humanity stood for one another, and now, they stood for those who had stood with them. In the days that followed, the Thalrians began to grasp what they had invited into their world. Humanity's strength was undeniable, but it was not strength alone that unsettled the galaxy. It was the principle guiding it. Empires fought for territory, resources, dominion. Humanity fought for connection, for loyalty, for the promise that even one life mattered. To other powers, this was irrational, even dangerous. To the Thalrians, it was revelation. The council convened again and again, weighing the consequences. To bind themselves to humanity was to choose a side in conflicts far larger than their fragile world. Yet as they debated, evidence of change appeared in the smallest corners of their society. Children learned human songs from the survivor, their voices weaving foreign melodies into familiar halls. Farmers accepted tools that tripled their yields, gifts offered freely by engineers who asked nothing in return. Healers exchanged knowledge with their human counterparts, discovering cures thought impossible. At every level, life was improving, not under domination but under alliance. The greatest test came not from enemies but from within. A faction of Thalrians, fearful of losing sovereignty, attempted to sabotage the human presence. They struck at a supply depot, believing it a gesture of resistance. But when they were caught, humanity did not answer with punishment. Instead, the human commander himself addressed them, standing unarmed before their defiance. He spoke of history, of Earth's own scars, of times when fear had driven humans to destroy one another until they learned that unity was survival. He did not threaten. He reminded them that their act of saving one stranger had already altered the stars. "You fear we will take your freedom," he said, "but freedom is all we have ever fought for. You kept one of us free when the universe would have let him die. That choice is the foundation of everything we are building here." For the Thalrians, it was not the ships that won trust. It was words like these, carried not with arrogance but with a strange humility, a recognition that kindness was a currency far more binding than fear. Slowly, opposition softened. Even those who still doubted could not deny the evidence before their eyes. Humanity had not come to rule. They had come to repay beyond Thalria. However, the storm gathered. Rival empires whispered of coalitions, of striking before humanity's influence spread further. To them, the alliance was a dangerous precedent. If other species learned that saving one human could bring the protection of an entire fleet, what would it mean for the balance of power? Old rulers feared rebellion. Old tyrants feared mercy itself. And so, tension grew, a web of potential war stretching across the stars. The Thalrians braced themselves for the inevitable, but once again humanity defied expectation. They did not launch preemptive strikes, nor did they withdraw into silence. Instead, they invited dialogue. In vast neutral halls, representatives of dozens of powers gathered, expecting threats masked as diplomacy. What they received instead was a statement of principle. The human delegation stood before them all and declared, "We did not come to conquer. We came because one of ours lived when he should have died, because strangers chose compassion when they had no reason to. If that frightens you, then you do not fear us. You fear the truth of your own cruelty." Silence fell like a stone. The galaxy was not accustomed to such bluntness. Empires built on fear found no ground to answer. Humanity had revealed a truth that could not be ignored. Kindness, when matched with strength, was a force more destabilizing than any fleet. For the Thalrians, this moment marked a turning point. They realized they were no longer merely the protectors of a survivor. They had become the proof of humanity's ethos. Their decision, once so small and uncertain, had sparked a chain that now reshaped the galactic order. And though fear still lingered, pride grew alongside it. They were not just witnesses. They were part of something greater, something enduring. The survivor often stood at the heart of these changes, not as a leader but as a symbol. He bore his scars openly, a reminder of fragility and resilience intertwined. To his people, he was proof of survival. To the Thalrians, he was proof of the power of one choice. When asked what he thought of the fleet above, he answered simply, "It is not the ships you should see. It is the promise they carry." And the promise was clear: no act of mercy would ever stand alone again.